Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. I'm Kyle Bryant. And I'm Sean Bombsark. Together, we are constantly seeking opportunities to live beyond our circumstances.
All right, everybody, you are listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I am Kyle. That is Sean.
What up?
And we are here with episode 60 today. And I'm pretty stoked to be here. So to kick things off, we have some stories about Don't Forget the Crew. And so, Sean, can you tell everyone what Don't Forget the Crew is?
Yeah,
just so we can catch everybody up.
Yeah, of course. So about a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, we talked about it on the podcast. So some people may already know, but basically we kind of tagline that phrase, "Don't forget the crew." But really, all it is giving some sort of tangible piece of appreciation to service workers. And we started doing that mainly with flight attendants. So when we get on a plane, we would hand them, say, a bag of chocolates. So the name crew really came from flight crew, but it's any sort of treat for a service worker, whether it be a rental car agent or a train agent or a flight attendant or any sort of industry that makes life better for you.
I gave a treat to my dry cleaner. It's actually done last for Christmas, so I considered that a Don't Forget the Crew thing.
Totally.
I didn't take a photo.
Yeah, that's fine. I actually haven't been taking as many photos lately.
Oh, okay. So what we're talking about is when you do this act of kindness to give your chocolates or whatever to your crew, you take a photo, like a selfie or something, and then you, with them and with the chocolates, or maybe just chocolates, whatever, just some photo to symbolize Don't Forget the Crew, and then you post it to Instagram or wherever you want, and you tag Don't Forget the Crew, hashtag Don't Forget the Crew, and that's how it works.
Yeah, the idea behind sharing it and posting it is to inspire other people to do the same thing. So before you know it, we've got little thank yous all over the world just for simply getting on a plane or picking up your dry cleaning.
Nice. All right, Sean, so can you give us a couple of stories from your experiences with Don't Forget the Crew this year?
Yeah, so a couple things have happened recently. We just thought it'd be cool to talk about or to share. I got on a plane maybe a month ago, and it was close to Christmas, real close to the holidays. And I noticed I get on the plane, I give away my candy, and I sat down, I don't know, 3 or 4 rows back, and there was only 4 or 5 people behind me that I noticed. And by the time I sat down and got comfortable, like I said, the 4th or 5th person behind me, I noticed he gave a box of chocolates to the flight attendant as well. And his was all beautifully wrapped with a bow and stuff. And I'm like, oh, cool, holidays. And he was a gentleman, probably 20 years older than me. And he ended up sitting next to me or in my same row. And I'm like, whoa, wait, you give him candy? And he's like, yeah, I've made it a habit over the years to give my flight crew on my last flight home every time. So I give them chocolate or candy or something. So I'm like, okay, so let's say you have 3 flights today. You reserve the treat for the crew that takes you home, the very last leg. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I gave him candy as well, and I've got some friends, and we all blah.
I do it on every flight, jerk.
Well, I explained to him why I'm interested, but I don't tell him our habit or my habit. But I ended up giving him a little card that told the story and, invites him to check it out online or Instagram. And he was it was cool. He was nice, but just very passive. Like, oh, you've been doing it for a while. Cool. Keep doing it. And like basically threw my card down. Like, I don't think he cared that other people were doing it.
Yeah.
It was his saying, and he was probably ready to be home and not talk to fellow passengers.
Leave me alone, dude.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought it was cool to see somebody else doing something similar in their own way.
Nice. So, and then the next day, I think you saw some.
Yeah. So another one. I think roughly, probably the same flight. So a lot of my flights are overnight. So go to UCLA a lot for FA-related trials and stuff. So I'll fly to LA from Sacramento, and then I come home the very next day. On my way to LA, there was somebody on my flight apparently who observed me give away candy. I didn't realize this until my return flight the very next day. He had been a couple people behind me on this second flight, and I gave the flight attendant my candy, and he said something like, oh, that's cool. Yesterday it was a green bag or a blue bag or whatever. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, yesterday you gave him the same brand, but it was a different flavor. And I'm like, you were on my flight yesterday?
Whoa.
He's like, yeah, I love seeing you give away chocolate.
That's
I'm like,
sweet.
that's so
Nice.
cool. So, of course, I ended up giving him a card and was like, dude, if you're flying, you should be giving treats as well. So I encouraged him and who I assumed to be his wife to get involved.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was kind of.
Nice.
I was like, wait, what? We're on the same flight. I think it speaks to just how small the world is. You always think you're isolated, but for whatever reason, that guy had the same exact flight schedule as I did.
Dude, when I used to live in Sacramento, I would go see Dr. Perlman at UCLA, and I would fly down in the morning and then fly back at night. And there would be like multiple people that had the same flight.
Thing.
Like, it's crazy. People do that every day. Yeah. Just fly down to LA and come back.
Yeah.
Like, that's their commute.
I think, true. Especially true for like state workers, Sacramento being the capital and then LA being the hub of a lot of activities. So,
yeah. So, I have one story that I wanted to share. I did not do Don't Forget the Crew as much as you. I did it quite a few times this year, but not as much. But, so I get on a flight, and usually it's like I'm getting on, and then people are right behind me, so I usually don't take a picture. But this time, for whatever reason, I had some time. So the flight attendant was super cool. And I was like, hey, do you want to take a picture with me? And like, here's the chocolate. Thank you for what you do. You want to take a picture with me? Sure. So she's like, come up to the cockpit. Let's do it in the cockpit. Nice. So she goes and asks the pilot. And the pilot's like, yeah, come on. He's like, he even took the picture for us. Nice. So it's me and this flight attendant. We took a picture in the cockpit. And I'm sitting there as everyone else is getting on the plane. I'm posting to I posted to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter because that's when I have a post. I'm like, all right, let's do it now. All.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then the flight leaves 3 or 4 minutes later. Before the flight left, I got a tweet back from Southwest Airlines that said, hey, thanks for showing your appreciation. We love having you on the flight. Give us your, tweet me back or PM me or something, and we'll send you some swag. I'm like, what? Awesome. So I PM'd them back, and, they looked up, I think I gave them my rewards number or something. They looked up my address. And then, that same week, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later, a box of stuff shows up from FedEx from Southwest. And it has, a little string bag in it with, what was all in it? There was a recharger for your cell phone.
I love it.
There was what the heck? Oh, some socks.
Some socks.
Super
Didn't you
nice
get some
socks.
playing cards?
Yep, playing
Maybe
cards,
a scarf.
Yep.
Is there a scarf in there? Yeah,
Yeah.
You sent me a picture, and we should post it and share it with people. Again, even though I know you may have shared it already, let's do it again and just see how they basically return the gesture. Like, wow, thanks for thinking of us. Here's some cool stuff.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I was so jealous because, I feel like I didn't start it, but I kind of started it.
You totally did.
I do it more often. And I just do it a lot, and nobody has sent me any swag. What am I doing wrong?
Sucks for you, man.
Yeah.
Hey, so real quick, let's just mention that because you say you do it more often than me, and I totally admit that. But you had a goal of doing it on every single flight this year, or in 2018. Did you accomplish that goal?
I sure did. I will be fair. There were a couple flights where I just wasn't in the mood, whether I was tired or long days or whatever. It's important to know I always do the gift as I get on the plane. So it's not reflective of how nice they were to me. It's before I even meet them. So it's no matter what, I'm giving candy away. And so when I'm not in the mood, it has nothing to do with the employees or the associates. It's just maybe I forgot to go to Target or wherever and buy a gift. So there were a couple times where I tried to talk myself out of spending $12 at the airport just to give away some candy. But always, right at the last minute, I'm like, no, Sean, that's not the right attitude. And so I go find the shop. But yeah, successfully every single flight last year. And I'm on a roll. I've been doing every flight for probably about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years. And I'm going to keep going with that habit.
All right, man. And we invite all of our listeners to participate as well. It's really easy. All you have to do is spend a few dollars on some chocolate at the store next time you go on your flight. So,
and we'd love to share your experiences too. So be sure to tag, like Kyle said. Don't forget the crew, and or email your pictures to us. We'll repost and we'll just spread the love and hopefully inspire other people to do the same thing.
Sweet.
So, Kyle, one of the things, or really the big thing we want to talk about today and the point of episode 60 is, I guess, twofold. One, we want to respond to a listener's set of questions. But in the midst of reading these questions, we were sort of inspired to make a conversation out of the several questions that Maurice submitted through Facebook. So, it's kind of reading some fan mail or listener mail, but also building a conversation around these questions. So, Kyle, would you mind sharing with us what you believe to be, I guess, the best first question for this conversation?
All right. No. And Marie did not pull any punches with her questions. She got right down to it. So, the first one is, what does having a disability mean to you? Oh.
Am I supposed to have an answer right now for that?
Yeah. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, it was a good question. And, at first it's a struggle to kind of come up with an answer. But ultimately, having a disability, what's that mean to me is basically life is going to be different. I think a lot of our listeners will know our answers to a lot of these programs just because they know our personalities. But having the disability for me doesn't mean that I'm a victim. It doesn't mean that I'm less than. It doesn't mean that I'm on the short end of the stick. In some cases, maybe all that could be true. But for me, all that means is that life is going to be a little bit different. compared to most people I know.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, and so all of these questions are things that I kind of address in my book. And one of the things that I have come to think is that, and it doesn't always play out in my mind all the time, but I continue to remind myself that disability is not good or bad. It just is. It's no one's fault. It's not the result of something most of the time. And, maybe an accident or rare disease that, like, for example, my parents had no idea what it was, right, before it manifested in me. And in many cases, disability is not good or bad. There's no one to blame. And you live your best life no matter what. Live your best. I feel like you live your best life not despite your disability, but despite anything, right? And
For sure.
so that's kind of more or less the overarching theme of how I think about it.
And I think you bring up a good point that really neither one of us probably can speak to. But I do want to say in a lot of cases or some cases, somebody's disability might be somebody else's fault. Maybe they were struck by a car or an accident or something. And so, like I said, I can't speak to that, but I'm willing to bet that if what I'm dealing with was because of somebody else's negligence, I might have a different perspective. So this comes to mind. I think it might be a good idea for us to pursue on two disabled dudes, for us to pursue maybe another guest who is victim of an accident or victim of a decision somebody else made.
Yeah.
So maybe they can shed some light on to how they move forward despite somebody else's quote unquote fault, if you will.
That's a good point. Yeah, that would be a good topic to bring up for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So the next question that Marie posed is, Sean, do you even feel disabled? Like day to day, do you think like you wake up and be like, oh man, it sucks that I'm disabled today?
Yeah, I certainly do feel it, but it's not constantly on my mind, so I don't wake up feeling disabled. But there are moments throughout every single day where, I will stumble or I will lose my balance or I will, take 3.5 minutes to put the key in the door because I can't just quite line it up right. When I handwrite, it hurts, So there are things throughout the day that remind me that my body is a little damaged. But I can't say that I actually feel like I'm a disabled individual in terms of it's all consuming. I get reminders, but it doesn't consume my mentality.
Yeah.
What about you? I know, for newer listeners, we have the same condition, but you are much further progressed than I am. So for you, it might look and feel a little differently on the outside. But what about mentally for you? Do you feel disabled?
No, I agree with your comments. I'm thinking along the same line as you, but because there are, like, I don't wake up and be like, oh, my life sucks, I'm disabled. But however, there are times, like, for example, I needed to switch from driving with my feet to driving with my hands. Like, that was a big, like, time that I had to confront my disability and be like, all right, I'm disabled. I hit this disease, so I have to take care of it and make modifications to my life. Or, transitioning to a wheelchair or using a walker for the first time. Stuff like that really forced me to confront it. But I think most of the time I tried to tackle things in my life as if it's not there. And that's not always practical, but I don't know that I always consider it in every situation. It's not the first thing, maybe, I guess. So
Sure. It makes me think of folks who are in a different, quote unquote, negative circumstance in life. Like, how many times have you encountered what you believe to be a homeless person, and they just seem so happy? They're all smiles. They're just enjoying life. They're singing a song. And to them, do they really feel poor or homeless or lost? Or do they that's just the way life is, and they're making the best of it?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that's a good point. And same thing for someone who's disabled. Like, yeah, there's an aspect of our lives that is different than people who are able-bodied, but there's a lot of things that's the same. And you know what? There's many things where I will, crush somebody who's able-bodied, like cycling, for example.
Good point.
So it's like, all right, who's disabled now?
Sure. That's true. I'm certainly no psychologist, but I wonder if feeling disabled is something we bring on ourselves when we begin to compare ourselves to other people. Because
totally agree.
When I really think about, like what you just said, there are other people that can't maybe ride a bike as far as you can. Well, it doesn't mean I'm better than them. It just means I'm different. But if I really begin to compare myself to other people, that's when I either feel like I'm bigger and badder, or I feel that I'm disabled because I can't do what they can do. So
100%.
Anyway, that's a side conversation that just came to mind.
No, that kind of leads to the next question. Are you ashamed or proud of being disabled? What do you think about that one, Sean? Ashamed or proud?
Overall, if I have to choose one or the other, of course I'm more proud than I am ashamed. But for me, they're completely different. I have zero shame in feeling disabled. I'm not sure I'm embarrassed by it, but I'm not ashamed. Like, there's nothing in there that says I'm a lesser human being because I have this condition or because I struggle with disability or have disability. I had nothing to do with that, so I don't feel shame. Now, of course, I'm embarrassed from time to time. I'll fall over or lose my balance or whatever the case may be, and there's embarrassing moments, but I'm definitely never ashamed. What about you?
I have to compare it to when I was first diagnosed, because there was so much shame, I think, and I think it changed when I started to own my situation and to understand that I could affect the way I feel and the way other people see me, and also realizing that it doesn't matter what other people think of me. It only matters what I think of myself, and the only way that anyone else can affect you by what they think is if you interpret what they think as bad. I don't know, maybe that's a little... Does that make sense? Like you've got to be the bigger person and be like, all right, this is my thing. I own this. This is my disease, my disability, and what other people think and what I think that other people think isn't gonna bring me down.
Sure.
So I think I could probably talk myself in circles because I haven't written this idea down yet.
Sure.
But that's kind of what I think as far as I feel like my shame came from what I thought other people thought of me. And once I got over that for myself, then that's when things changed.
Sure.
So.
I think it's worth I looked up the definition of shame just to be crystal clear, but the first thing that pops up is the words a painful emotion caused by consciousness of guilt, shortcoming, or impropriety. And having this disease isn't my fault, so there's no guilt, and I don't feel like I've caused a shortcoming in my life. So for me, that's why I talk about I don't think anybody should be ashamed of a condition like this. If somebody put me in a wheelchair, they might feel ashamed because they feel guilty. Mm-hmm. That's on them. But I'm not going to be, I don't, I know it's different for everybody, so I don't want to downplay the feeling of being ashamed. But I don't think it's a fair assessment of your condition because it's not your fault. So we've got to find a way to get beyond that and live a life that's not full of shame. When we're surrounded by or we're oppressed by shame, we bring that on to ourselves. That's our fault. Of course, there might be other people in our life that make us feel ashamed. That it's time to remove them from your life. Like, expand your circle of influence and find new friends if you need to. But the feeling of guilt that's brought on by ourselves.
Yeah, and you were talking about that there are other people that might make you feel ashamed, and that's on you too. That's what I think. Like, I'm horrible at this, but I try to tell myself, you know what, this is on you. Like, whatever they think, that's on them. And however you perceive that, that's on me.
Sure. And
so I think, that thought helps me, like, own the situation and, like, then I start living for myself and not for what other people think. So.
Real quick, if we were to go back, or our listeners were to go back and listen to episode 50, you hear a bit of my story in terms of getting married and then walking away from that marriage and struggling with sexuality. Now, those things were actions and decisions I made. So there was a season where I felt a lot of shame based around those decisions. But that's completely different than being born with a disability. So for me, there isn't shame around that, my condition. I'm certainly proud of my life, and we haven't really talked about the proud piece. So to transition out of that heavy conversation of shame, I'm certainly proud of what it's caused me to do, and I think that will lead into the next question here in just a moment. But we've said it before. If it wasn't for FA, I never would have ridden my bike across country, and there never would have been a film, a documentary centered around life of the FA that features Kyle and Sean. This podcast wouldn't be a thing. So I'm certainly more proud of the condition than I am embarrassed or ashamed by it.
I agree. I don't have a whole lot to add to that because I feel the same. Just being able to, this reflection right now would not be happening if I don't think it would if I were able-bodied, and I think this is a good conversation for anyone, whether you're disabled or not, and so I think it's cool it presents the opportunity to have these more sort of existential conversations. So
yeah, and I think you're right. It applies to every walk of life. Do you feel ashamed or do you feel poor because you lost your job or whatever the case may be? It doesn't just have to be centered around disability. It just is for this conversation. So hopefully some listeners out there are able to find a way to apply this mentality to your specific walk of life, whether it's disease or disability related or not. And like I mentioned, it really does set up the next question, which is, Kyle, has having FA changed your view about disability?
Absolutely. 100%. Because I feel like I understand it better. And I say better and not fully because it's just, we continue to learn, right? But
Sure.
anyway, the point is that, before I knew I had FA, I would see somebody in a wheelchair and be like, oh, like feel really sorry for them. Oh, poor thing. It sucks to be that person. Like I never wanted that. That's the worst thing, right? And being on the other side of that situation now, I realize that like it's not, the wheelchair is not the point, like walking is not the point of life.
Yeah.
And it's shown me that like sort of, it's gotten me closer to what life is about. I don't profess to know the secret to life, but I think that it's gotten me a little closer. And so that's how it's changed my view. And if I still thought people in wheelchairs were pitiful, poor little things, then I wouldn't think a whole lot of myself. And so it's absolutely changed my outlook on disability.
That's true. So I think the same for me. And one of the things I mentioned in responding to Marie is that it's allowed me to be a lot more gracious. Like it has caused me to be maybe a little more sympathetic, certainly a little more empathetic, but overall I'm most proud that I'm realizing that I can be a little more gracious because I understand some of the challenges, not all of them, but when I see somebody struggling or in a wheelchair or fighting with whatever disability they may have, it's easier for me to assume something is wrong and it's out of their control.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, oh man, that guy's drunk, or oh, he's strung out on drugs, or wow, what a tweaker. There's certainly a lot more room for me to be a little more gracious because I have no idea what their story is. I have no idea what their disability is. I have no idea what kind of life they've lived up to that point. And so now knowing that my life is what it is today because of certain progressions, most people don't have a clue. And when they jump to the conclusion of, oh, he must be drunk, it's not, if I didn't face that sort of mentality or those encounters, then I probably wouldn't be as gracious as I am toward other people. So I appreciate, even though they're sometimes frustrating, I appreciate those encounters because of what they have taught me about other people in similar situations.
Yeah. Nice.
There's, speaking of this particular topic, there's a comedian lady in a wheelchair, and she gives a talk about being somebody's pity party. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? Have you seen that or heard of it?
I've seen that video, but I don't know who it is or what it is. We'll see if we can find it, and if we find it, we'll post it.
Well, I was going to tell people to go look at it right now on the recording, but I promise you we will link it in the podcast or the episode notes because I will find it. I'm just not able to find it immediately.
I think she also talks a lot about, like, I don't want to be someone's inspiration.
Yeah.
That kind of subject. So, yeah.
We'll find it. Check it out on the show notes. It's a good... A, she's hilarious, and B, it's a very insightful talk. So.
Nice. Cool.
So with that, great conversation, Kyle. Thanks for helping me get through that conversation.
You always need help, so you're welcome.
There are a couple things we want to mention before we say goodbye, I want to mention Kyle's book. It's only about a month away. So be sure to pre-order that. Kyle, where do we go to pre-order?
Easiest thing would be to go to kyleabryant.com, and all the links are right there where you can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or a couple other venues or platforms and order the book. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Of course, and just in case, Shifting into High Gear is the title.
Yep, it's on Amazon, yeah.
And, of course, don't forget, we've got some merchandise on the website. So if you're looking for a new hat or a new T-shirt, be sure to check out the store on the Two Disabled Dudes website. Super easy. It's all spelled out, twodisableddudes.com.
Yep, and then finally, find us online and leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Those reviews really help us out a lot. It can be a little, I've heard that it can be a little frustrating, but stick it out and give it a try a couple times. If it doesn't take the first time, keep going, and that we would really appreciate your review.
And while you're at it, since we're talking about being online, feel free to send us a thought or a comment on today's conversation. You can always email if you want it to be a little more private, or message us on Facebook, or of course, reach out on Twitter, Instagram, wherever else you can find us. We are readily available to discuss your perspective on these things. So thanks for tuning in today. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com, and please subscribe on the iTunes. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Special thanks to our production team, Jake Tompkins and Matt LaFleur.
Until next time, keep living with urgency.